Traditional studio portraits are and always will be a popular request. You know the ones I mean, where you have a plain backdrop and your subject is sitting or standing right in the center of the shot, and you have fairly even lighting. And those portraits are great. However, there are lots of other options that you can explore. I actually did a portrait session recently, and to liven up the portraits and to make them more personal, I included some of my favorite locations and some of my favorite things. During this video, I'll show you a couple photos from my shoot. If you're a VIP, you can also log in on snapcheck.com and see the whole gallery of portraits, as well as an additional making of the shoot video, where I explain the details of setting up the shoot. Okay, first let's talk about getting out of the studio. I love to take my show on the road. There are, of course, a few popular choices. A grassy park is a common request for me. I see a lot of people also in my area taking portraits in front of the man-made waterfalls at country clubs or at the entrances to housing developments. I've also seen a lot of portraits where they're getting a little more hip, I guess, where the people are on railroad tracks or the girl is in front of an old barn. Some of these settings are certainly cool and can definitely be an interesting background. But I always wonder if they have any significance to the subject. Like, has that girl ever even been in a barn? I mean, maybe she has, I don't know. But my point is, I prefer to choose a location that has some sort of significance to my client. For example, if I'm doing a high school football player's portraits, I might do some of them on the football field. Maybe I'll even get them running around a little bit. Or if I'm taking portraits of a family with young children, we might head to the playground. Getting out of the studio serves a few purposes. First, I feel like people tend to be uptight in the studio setting. It always takes some time to loosen them up. But when you're at a location where they feel comfortable, things just go more smoothly, more quickly. Also, I view portraits as a snapshot of a time in a person's life, which sounds a little cheesy, but it's true. You know, a simple photo of them against a black backdrop doesn't really give them any frame of reference as to what was going on at that time in their lives. A lot of people like to have their favorite things included in their portraits, which is another way to really personalize their photo. I've had people ask to include everything from their dog, to their guitar, to their favorite book. I get the request a lot for senior portraits. And for those of you not in the US, when high school seniors graduate here, they traditionally have a set of portraits done, and we call them senior portraits. Anyway, people like to show off their interests no matter their age. If you incorporate a combination of location and things that interest a person, you will almost certainly strike gold. I find that the client is always so much more comfortable during the shoot, and they end up loving the results when they get to include some of their favorite things. For me, two of my favorite things are hiking and taking photos. So here's an example of what I mean. I'm in the desert on a hike, which I love, and I'm taking photos. All that being said, you know, about being comfortable in a location and about the studio being kind of boring, you can still bring personal items into the studio and make it look interesting. Here's an image of me in the studio with my camera. It's a simple image, but I'm showing off my interest in photography. Okay. Now let's talk challenges to the options that I've mentioned. When you are planning to take photos outside, you always have the elements to deal with. Rain, wind, too much sun, too little sun. When I make the appointment with the client, I always say that I will check the weather forecast and the sunrise and sunset times starting a week or so before the portrait appointment, and then I will confirm the appointment a couple days before we are scheduled to meet. I also scout the location ahead of time to make sure that I have options while we're there. I also always bring some lighting, you know, usually even just speed lights with me as a backup, just in case the sun isn't cooperating. The main thing is really just being flexible. Sometimes you just have to roll with the punches. If you're at the park and the wind picks up, you know, either turn your client so that you can use the wind, or go find a little shelter. You know, you can sit them down by a fence or something where the wind isn't tossing around their hair and their clothes so much. Or if you're working with an animal, which can be challenging, you know, like the person's dog is simply not interested in sitting down for a photo. That's okay. Walk around with them and take some photos while you guys walk around. Of course, standard studio portraits certainly have their place, and I actually love a good, simple portrait of a person. And you can certainly liven it up by simply letting yourself get creative with the lighting or in post-processing. But you do have a lot of options too. don't be afraid to make some suggestions to your clients, or at least offer to take them outside of the traditional studio setting. They don't always know, that they have the option for something different. Let me know if you have any questions.